Today we will talk about the bow and the crossbow, two weapons with similar functions but different implementations, and try to understand in what ways the crossbow surpassed the bow and why it could not completely replace the bow on the battlefield. Let's start with the crossbow. It is a projectile weapon that uses a rigid limb mounted on a stock and a mechanical trigger mechanism. Its main advantage has always been its ease of use. Even a beginner can shoot confidently from a crossbow after just a few hours of training. Unlike the bow, the tension of the crossbow does not depend on the physical preparation of the shooter. The energy is stored in advance, rather than being held by the hands. This means the crossbow remains stable even during long periods of aiming. Historians believe that crossbows first appeared in China nearly 2,500 years ago. Archaeologists have found bronze trigger mechanisms that are surprisingly similar to modern ones. Chinese armies used massed crossbow volleys, which allowed them to defeat larger enemies. In Europe, the crossbow became popular in the Middle Ages due to its ability to penetrate metal armor. Some heavy crossbows could pierce knightly plate armor from as far as 50 meters. To cock such models, a winch was required. However, it was the power and the ability to shoot without fully standing up that made the crossbow a formidable siege weapon. With the crossbow, you could barely peek over the fortifications and still make an accurate shot, whereas no bow could do that. The speed of a bolt can exceed 100 meters per second. This speed surpasses that of many traditional bows. The crossbow's design ensures high shot repeatability, with a rate of fire of about 6 shots per minute. A small error in aiming only causes a slight deviation in the trajectory. Due to the rigid fixation of the bolt, hand tremors have almost no impact on accuracy. The primary ammunition for the crossbow was crossbow bolts. Bolts are generally shorter than arrows but have higher mass, which increases their kinetic energy on impact. This makes the crossbow effective against dense materials like armor or chain mail. Research shows that the bolt retains its energy better than a light arrow at shorter distances. The ballistics of a bolt are more linear at shorter ranges, which makes shooting more predictable and straightforward. However, the crossbow also has drawbacks. First, reloading takes longer than with a bow. The mechanism requires regular maintenance. The limbs of the crossbow are fragile in low temperatures. The wide limbs can get caught on surrounding objects in the forest. The weight of a crossbow is usually higher than that of a bow. However, accuracy and power compensate for these weaknesses. Let's move on to the bow. The bow is over 10,000 years old. Archaeologists have found ancient bows made of yew and birch. The principle of the bow's operation is based on the elastic deformation of the limbs. The energy of the shot depends entirely on the strength of the archer. This makes shooting from a bow a physically active process. The bow develops strength, endurance, and coordination. The light construction of the bow makes it convenient for prolonged use. The weight of the bow rarely exceeds 2 kilograms. An arrow is longer than a bolt but lighter. Due to its lower mass, the arrow accelerates faster. The speed of an arrow can reach 90 meters per second. The trajectory of the arrow is more curved. This makes aiming at longer distances more difficult, but allows for effective shooting over a larger area. The shape of the arc helps the arrow bypass obstacles. Unlike a crossbow bolt, an arrow maintains stability at longer ranges. Feathers stabilize its flight, and there are many aerodynamics aspects to the arrow that are scientifically significant. A light arrow loses energy more quickly, but maintains flight speed for a longer time. The bow creates less noise when shooting. This makes it more stealthy and allows for shooting without revealing one's position. One of the main advantages of the bow is that it requires almost no maintenance. The limbs of the bow are easier to replace than the mechanism of the crossbow. The bow is highly resilient in the field. It is resistant to cold. It is convenient to carry over long distances. The bow allows for fast consecutive shots, developing a very high rate of fire. An experienced archer can shoot several arrows per second. This rate is unattainable for the crossbow. In historical battles, it was the rate of fire that gave archers an advantage. English archers, for example, could unleash a rain of arrows with tremendous destructive power, suppressing the enemy. The bow requires a developed sense of distance. The archer must consider the wind, distance, and shooting angle, and learning this process often requires years of dedicated training. Let's move on to the final comparison. On the medieval battlefield, the bow was nearly equal to the crossbow. It was cheaper to produce, had significantly higher rate of fire, and was easier to repair. Thanks to the bow, one could continuously cover the necessary area, suppressing the enemy. The crossbow was most effective in sieges and shooting from behind cover, and it was also capable of penetrating tougher armor. The crossbow was always cocked and ready to shoot at any moment, which could be decisive in the event of a surprise attack or ambush. In conclusion, I can say that until the invention of firearms, the bow was irreplaceable on the battlefield, while the crossbow surpassed it only in certain aspects. Which is better depends on each individual, but history shows that for centuries, the bow maintained greater stability and popularity. Thank you for your attention.